Everybody. Today we have Walt Brown. Now, Walt is the author of the upcoming book, Attract to Repel, that's published by Ben Bell. His clients call him Uncle Walt, and he's a seasoned entrepreneur who's been in coaching for 15 years. And today we will be talking about some of the things that are in his upcoming book. Walt, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
You are very welcome. We've got some really interesting things today, and I think what is unique about this interview is there's a lot of concepts and tools that you can equip people with that are going to help them navigate some really challenging decisions. I'm going to start at the top, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about Bite 7. Now, you've told me a little bit what this means, but I'd love for you to explain it to the audience. What is Bite 7?
It's a way to measure and then take action on like organizational health.
Yeah.
Getting rid of all the confusion and dysfunction in an organization. And so what BITE means is buy-in, inclusion, trust, and engagement. It's not just an engagement survey.
Yeah.
And we're basically, when you take those three things together, you can measure the level of trust in an organization that transfers into the organizational health.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I feel like so many organizations, you hear them saying, oh, we should get an engagement survey. And I think for a lot of companies, if they even get to that point, it starts and ends there.
Yeah.
But, your framework, it's far more robust than that. And I think it gets at other things that are really important.
Yeah, it does. And, a lot of times we could talk about the three traps,
Okay.
so very often organizations are doing engagement stuff and the employees feel like it's being done to them as opposed to for them. So you got to flip it. And then the other issue that happens a lot of times is they just make it way too complicated. There are too many questions. We're down to 7 questions or they're always changing. And then the biggest mistake is they don't have any way to share the results and then come up with an action plan to respond.
Yeah.
So you're ended up with this just dead-ended junk.
Yeah.
You're just like, whatever, so.
Yeah. And employees feel like you wasted their time. They went and did all that. And then for what? And what do you do with it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see a lot of organizations kind of making that mistake and failing there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I think changing your company culture is a huge ask. So when when you're thinking about that, I think probably a good place to start is like, how do you even tell if it's a healthy culture? So what would you say are the signs of a healthy culture? So if you've got a person right now, maybe they're a leader in their organization, maybe they're an employee, but they want to identify, like, is this a place that has a healthy culture or not? How would you go about doing that?
Well, of course, I'm going to say measure it through the Bite 7 approach. But,
Yeah.
I think you're kind of asking a question around symptoms.
Yeah.
Right. Just icky, low levels of trust, backbiting, meetings before meetings, meetings after meetings, people not finishing tasks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for it, but just the symptoms are pretty clear when you're just part of a group where you don't really fit.
Yeah.
People aren't accountable or responsible, or they're always politicking and never really saying what's on their mind. Those are just symptoms of low buy-in, inclusion, trust, and engagement, just low trust. Sorry, I have a bad story there for you, but
no, listening to you, it like reminds me of organizations I've been in the past where I felt like it wasn't good. And to a degree, it's like maybe there isn't like okay, here's a checklist, but it when you see it, and
kind of like that famous Supreme Court saying, the guy goes, well, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. So I know we're editing this, but right. You just sort of, it feels icky and you just, you're kind of unhappy. Everybody's unhappy. They're complaining. That kind of stuff, just low energy.
We spend far too much time working to just exist in an environment like that. I tell people, in my channel, like, you just spend way too much of your life working, and the environment that you're in can impact either positively or adversely the time you spend outside of working for you to just willingly exist in an environment like that.
Well, and see, that's the whole below like Bite 7 is just this desire for me to destroy the confusion and dysfunction that lives in organizations, that makes your life at work miserable. Because if we can make work a place that's not chaotic and and really a place that's like calm, and you go and you know what to expect, that translates into the world.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to work and you're triggered every single day, then you come back and you're just like being triggered by the world, and it creates kind of a lousy spot. So that's really the underlying piece that we're trying to do with Bite Seven.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, it's a good mission, you know, because I've been in places, um,
We're
employers where Sunday night hits and I'm just like, oh man, like I'm not excited about tomorrow. And Sunday night, I should be working, I should be worried about the House of the Dragon episode I'm going to watch and how enjoyable it's going to be, not
right.
miserable about tomorrow.
Or fired up about what you're getting ready to go do tomorrow because over the weekend you had kind of a breakthrough and you're looking forward to sharing that with your teammates. You know,
Yeah.
that's the positive buy-in that we're trying to look for. And it really belongs to the organization to create that. You know, the
Yes.
book's name is Attract or Repel. And we're really saying that the onus lives on the shoulders of the organization to create an organization where people know whether they're bought into it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
It's powerful. It's powerful to bring the right people towards you and to push the people who maybe wouldn't be the best fit away. And I mean,
yeah.
when you push people away, like that can sound at a glance like a negative thing, but it's good for them. Like if someone isn't going to be a fit in your environment, them being repelled is actually to their benefit just as much as it is organizationally.
Yeah, and then we actually some of the words we use in the framework is the word promise. And when you
Yeah.
think about a human promise, it's a really powerful word. You know, when you give somebody your promise and then you keep it, you build high levels of trust. And
Yeah.
it really is up to the organization to define what it means to, you know, be bought in, included, trust, and have high levels of engagement. And you turn your definition of it, we'll talk about the definition in a minute, into promises. And you're saying, Brian, this is who we are. Let me describe it really, really well. And I want you to fit, because if you don't fit, it's not fair to you. But if
Yeah.
you can live into these things and help me keep my promise that I'm going to surround you with people who are these types of folks as our culture, then it'll be a great fit. But
Yeah.
otherwise, it don't come because it's going to be horrible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and again, I do think that's doing them a service to be able to clearly outline that so people can make that, you know,
It's
that
hard work. You know,
that
and a lot of times you know, when you start a company, you have this dream of this incredible place where you want to surround yourself with amazing people. And
yeah.
over time, the organization grows, and sometimes you'll let folks in that, you know, in day one, you never would have let in, but then they kind of end up kind of holding you hostage a little bit and you're afraid to let them go, but really they're destroying your organization. I call them terrorists, you know, organizational terrorists. And,
Yeah.
you know, you're not hating the company you're coming into work with on Monday. You're really want to avoid Johnny. You know,
Yeah.
Johnny's a jerk. I don't feel like working with Johnny. So, you know, it's set it up where, you know, so sometimes it's hard for companies to regain their culture because they got to make some really hard decisions. Johnny
Yeah.
might be a superstar, might be a lot of revenue in, but at the end of the day, he's going to kill you in the long haul.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, and I think it might be a Netflix hiring quote, is, you know,
Yeah.
don't hire brilliant jerks because the cost of teamwork is too high.
Yeah. That's
And I love that. And I think it's really true. Um, you know, we were talking about like the Sunday night dread of like going into a place where it doesn't feel
yeah.
like a good fit. One of the things I thought was really interesting from our first conversation is you said that there's actually a way to evaluate this as a person who's working, right? So if you're working
Yeah.
for a company right now and you're thinking about leaving, there's probably a way you should thoroughly evaluate that to make sure it's the right decision. I'm just going to shut up and let you talk about that because I thought it was interesting. What advice would you give someone who's in that position?
Well, I'm going to share the 7 critical needs is what I'm going to share with
Okay.
you, Brian. And it comes from a lot of study sort of started back in 2014 where everyone was complaining about millennials,
Yeah.
right? Just all the stereotypes and stuff. And
Yeah.
I was like client number 80 or so. And I scratched my head and said, I don't see that going on with the companies I'm working with. And as a matter of fact, their millennials are getting ready to, you know, take over the world. And it's just that classic stereotype. And I did some focus groups for about a year and a half with these folks that worked in these companies to figure out what is the pattern that we were laying down and what was the company doing right that was allowing the person to buy in. And so if you're sitting there and you're Sunday night, you're worried about going in or you're talking to like your loved one or a child or you know, just, you know, your significant other, you know, you can say to them, hey, Brian, is that a place where you feel like you belong? Do you have the same core values and like, you know, sort of underlying beliefs? And do you have the skills to be there? Do you feel like you belong? And if you're like a no, then you're going to have fear triggered. And
Yeah.
that it leads to really unclear thinking. And the second question you ask yourself is this a place that I believe? You know,
Mm,
do I believe in the products and the services? Do I believe in where leadership is taking the organization? Do I believe where our resources are going? You know, we want to know, humans, we want information. We want to know where the company's going. Being kept in the dark, there's no way you believe you're being kept in the dark. So do I not belong or believe any of these? If any of these are triggered negative, they're critical needs that have to be met. And then just one can actually make you think about taking off. And the
yeah.
third, it kind of flips at this point, is you understand and embrace what you're accountable for. You know,
Yeah.
really clear definition of what your objectives are and how they tie to the belief. You're not just coming in wondering about what you do. The fourth one is that you understand and embrace how the organization, uh, excuse me, I screwed up. The fourth one is that you understand and embrace how you're measured against those accountabilities.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
we all grew up with rubrics. We want to know what a good job looks like, and just this never ending, never measure, never finish world can really create a lot of like anxiety in the average human. So you don't know if you've done a good job or not. The fifth one is you understand and embrace how the organization listens and how
Yeah.
you can be heard. It just needs to be clear. You know, we're not saying you yell in the hall to be heard. It has to be very clear from the company, the organization, say, okay, Brian, this is when we listen these 6 times during the week or whatever. They need to be clear, and you need to say, am I being heard or not? The sixth one is you understand how you can participate in your own development. It needs to be
Mm,
clear. You can't
yeah.
be going, you know, oh, I wonder how I do that. It needs to be super clear. And a lot of times people are driven by their development. They don't see the path to the future. And if it's unclear, you know, the company might think that they're developing all day long, but it's not clear to you as an individual, and that strikes like a negativity piece, and you're taking off to the next person that offers that development. And then
Yeah.
finally, it's just balance
Yeah.
and balanced here. And different people have different levels of what they can anticipate from a work-life balance. You know, what does that look like in their own lives? What does the compensation look like? And then, you know, how is this company helping me take care of my wellness? And, you know, all these things need to be positive in order for you to be bought in. And any of them being negative, you know, maybe it's in the right place for you. Maybe it's a great way to say, well, you know, you said no to 3 of those things, honey. Maybe you need to look around. And the next company you look for their definition of these 7 things and see if you fit their culture.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
that's great. I think I've made videos on, hey, it's time to look for a new job and what are the signs, but I think that's a really thorough system that I think anybody can just walk through those 7 things and determine like, okay, how do I feel about the conclusion of this?
right.
How many pluses and how many minuses? And I think at the end of that conversation you have yourself, it becomes abundantly clear whether or not you should remain or it's worth seeking
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Right. Exactly. It's
Um,
a fun framework.
I know that there's going to be hiring managers and people leaders out there, and I think that is an incredibly important job. And I'm sure many of them want to do well, but they aren't equipped. If you
Yeah.
had, what advice would you give leaders about creating a great environment? If you had to give them like a quick snippet of like, here's what you should start with, what advice would that be?
Well, I'm a kind of a systems nerd, so I
Yeah.
apologize, but the recognition that you have what I call an organizational operating system or a business operating system at the company, hiring managers and leaders, what we're talking about here. And inside that operating system are tools that you use. So, you know, your benefits package, your time off policies, your meeting pulses, the way you share the plans of the organization. These tools need to be in place to allow the individual to get to alignment or to like positive energy around the 7 critical needs.
Yeah.
And so it's not as complicated as a lot of people think. And it's not really, you know, an ether. It's a very
Yeah.
specific thing. You know,
Yeah.
this is how we hear. This is inventory of our meetings, and this is when you come. This is what you're listening for. This is how you're account. You know, just being super clear of the tools, so you can use a survey and see where you're weak, and then look against your operating system tools to see whether you actually are missing a tool or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
so sorry, I just kind of went right to the heart of it, but it's
yeah.
I think
No, I
actually
mean, the things in that you describe in those, the 7 questions, like they are not things that are um unreasonable to ask for. Clarity in what you need to accomplish on a day-to-day basis is reasonable. And for hiring managers who want to create that good environment where someone
yeah,
can think about those things and check a bunch of yeses,
right.
it
Yeah,
shouldn't
that's
be that
we
hard.
actually we actually flip it for the hiring manager and say, once you get organized, then you turn these into promises. Brian, I'm promising to surround you with people who belong and believe and are accountable, measure, heard, develop, and balance. And this is what it means in your case to be to be accountable and measured.
Yeah.
Go and make sure that makes sense to you. And if it does, come on. And then
Yeah.
every 2 days we'll talk about it and make sure you're still in alignment. If you're not, then maybe the decision is for you to move on. Or can we get in alignment? It's just getting it simple.
Yeah.
I
I
see I
think
got fired up.
the phrasing, like that it's a promise too, makes it to me like a bit like personal, like it's a relationship, and it's like, hey, I want this to work, and I'm going to invest in it. And I like that the terminology. I think the terminology
Yeah.
gets you to where you
Very,
want to be too.
very intentional on that word.
Yeah,
That a promise is, you go back and you look at all the philosophers and stuff and you dig into, sorry, I'm going kind of nerd on y'all, but
no, that's all right.
it is a promise comes out of like nowhere, and it's only given by the will of one person to another. And when you make a promise to someone, you're inferring rights to you. I'll give you a ride, Brian. Now you have the right
Yeah,
to hold me to that promise. So we
yeah,
flip the script and make it for them and not to them. It's just
yeah.
that's a really important part of the whole program.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I think that delivers. I think that that accomplishes its goal. I want to ask one more question before we wrap up. I know we got to close out here. What are you passionate about outside of work?
This is going to sound really odd, y'all, but I spend a lot of time on beaver dams and beaver bottoms.
Okay, I'm
Walking
intrigued.
dam, and I'm kind of I'm into it. And when you think about, beavers build stuff. And so we
Yeah,
all only think that humans can build things, but when you sit down on a beaver bottom and watch the way that they're channeling the power of a flowing creek or moving water against water, they are just using like nature
yeah.
to their to their benefit. I don't know if you knew this, but or not, but MIT, their engineering ring always has a little picture of a beaver cut into it. They call it nature's engineer. And so
Okay.
I spend time in the winter, of course, not in the summer because it's very snaky in a beaver bottom, but
Yeah.
just recognizing the way they flow and reclaiming beaver bottoms and stuff like that. It's just sort of really back to nature things. Maybe I'll write a book on that someday.
That is awesome. If you had given me 1,000 guesses to guess what you would have like talked about during the interest, it wouldn't have been that, but I'm so glad you went there because that's a good one. I love asking this question because I get some really interesting answers. Well, Walt, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing everything.
Thanks, man.
When is this book going to be out so people can grab it?
March 8th, March
Okay.
11th of 2025, excuse me, is the official date. Uh,
Okay.
Factor Repel, Ben Bella Books. So it's in Barn. It'll be in Bar. It's actually in Barnes and Noble and Amazon and normal publishing stuff. So it's
Yeah.
cool.
All right. Awesome. Well, people can look for it then. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
All right, use the questions.